Hi, I'm Renee Seltzer, founder of Feeding My Kid, and in today's episode, I'd like to introduce you to Tammy Bishop, who's an occupational therapist and feeding specialist. So she's going to be able to answer your questions that we often get through Facebook and on the website. So I'm really excited to introduce her. So she's going to go through and just answer a variety of questions, provide insights that we don't often have, and just being an occupational therapist, she's going to be able to see and help us understand, when is it that you need to see an occupational therapist? I'm so excited to be covering all these topics with her, and let's get started. Some of the things that we talked about were, sometimes it's occupational therapy, but sometimes it's a medical condition. So if a child is gagging or throwing up, what do you normally recommend first?
The first step is to make sure that the child is medically cleared for feeding therapy. There is an example of a child I worked with a year ago who at 12 months of age was having frequent vomiting and gagging during all meals, snacks and regular meals. And so I was called into the classroom to observe the child, and indeed he was having trouble handling his food. So I recommended to the teacher that to have the family see the pediatrician. And the family did follow through, and the pediatrician said, "Don't worry about it, he'll outgrow it." That didn't sit well with me because I thought a child at 12 months of age should not be gagging and vomiting several times a day. That's pretty damaging on the esophagus. So I recommended a second opinion, and I recommended a GI, a gastroenterologist, appointment for the family to see what that doctor thought. And sure enough, they discovered that the sphincter between the stomach and the esophagus was too small, and so that the child's tummy wasn't able to clear the food in a timely manner so that as the child continued to eat, the food could flow through. And so that's what was causing the gagging and the vomiting. So with proper medication and some feeding therapy, the child is doing very well now.
Exactly. So, that's one of the things where, you have to clear your child for medical issues. Sometimes it's an allergy and the esophagus is actually closing up a little bit with that food. So that that's causing the child either to throw up or just not enjoy eating.
Exactly.
And that's actually a big risk long term by not addressing it is a child who throws up or gags often could start to associate food as something to avoid because I don't want that burning feeling, it hurts.
Yes.
And then what do? They start to go on a food boycott, and then that causes even more issues.
Yep, that's very true.
Later on.
Yep.
What do you do with kids that don't eat any vegetables? That's a big one that I always get, and it's a hard one.
It is.
It's multi-pronged, I think.
Yep, I would say the first thing to do is expose them to vegetables and fruits as much as possible, and engage them in having them interact with the food. So not just putting on their plate and allowing them to ignore it, but encouraging them to look at it, to talk about it, having the children come into the kitchen and help you prepare the vegetables and the fruits, basically increasing their exposure to vegetables and fruits.
Yeah, and I remember you even, so Tammy was our occupational therapist, or one of the ones that we had with our son, and I remember you were even, make it fun, let the food touch their arm and play with it and go up their arm and eventually make it towards their mouth, but with no pressure to eat.
Right, correct.
So do you want to kind of walk through why you would recommend that?
Sure. So there's a program that I use with the children when I do feeding therapy, and it is Dr. Kay Toomey's sequential oral sensory approach to feeding. And this is an excellent program that has many steps working with the child from the point of being in the room with the food all the way to the point of chewing and swallowing the food. And so there are many steps in between. And what I do with the children is basically follow these steps to eating. So we start out being able to tolerate the food near us. We work toward tolerating the food on us. Then we work toward tolerating the food closer to our face. And so this progression helps the children become more trusting of the food, more trusting of the adult, because there's never ever a demand put on the child to do anything that they're not ready to do yet. So it's a gentle way of motivating children to be more comfortable with the food.
Yeah, so when Tammy says, it's completely non-pressuring. So if the child all of a sudden freaks out because you put the food on the plate, take the food off the plate and step back one step.
Yes.
So at each one, you're going with the child's comfort level through the steps to see, okay, what are you comfortable with? If you start to see them tense up,
Right.
pull back.
Yes.
What you want to do in general is just take the pressure off eating, right?
Right.
So kind of walk through why.
Well, eating should be a social and a fun time at the table. So many times children are seated by themselves or in front of a computer and just told to eat, take another bite, eat. That's not fun. Eating should be a social time with family, with friends. Even if you are sitting by yourself, you should enjoy the food that you're eating. And so that's why it's really important.
Yeah. One of the things I've read and really saw this with my own kids is, pre-made food and pre-made baby food. Because it's all so exactly uniform and the puree is always really consistent, my kids struggled with textures. My kids struggled with change because once I started making homemade chicken nuggets, they were all different. Some were burned, some were delicious, some were not. And it took me a long time to get past that with them. But what would you recommend with parents who are just starting out? Would you say try to make as much as you can at home to help with that? Or do you see that?
Yes, a lot of times. Definitely, if you can make your own baby food, your own food in general is much better for you than the packaged foods. Also, you can change the baby foods. If you don't have the time to make your own foods, take packaged foods and augment them with spices and herbs and change the flavor to them so that the food isn't always the same tasting or the same texture every single time the child has it. And if I may get on a soapbox, the fruit pouches and the vegetable pouches, those are not meant to be sucked from. Those are meant to be squirted into a bowl and eaten with a spoon. So what I've been told is that when children suck it straight out of the pouch, they don't see it and they don't feel it in their mouth. It just goes straight back into their throat. So what happens is they become accustomed to that, and then when they do see the fruit or the vegetable and then feel it in their mouth, then it's a whole new experience, and they are not fans of it.
Yeah. Having a child that actually struggled with a lot of jaw weakness and cheeks and lip weakness, it was a hard road because he didn't have the skill set to chew. So Tammy was really there to help us to figure out how to get him to chew and how to help him overcome that. It would have been great if at 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, we addressed it versus after a year, because once they hit over a year, they don't like things in their mouth.
Right, especially when someone else is putting it there.
And it's really, it's just much harder on you to deal with it later on than it was if I just knew about it earlier and really did things the right way.
Yep. Another great way to help children desensitize their mouth is to allow them to mouth things. I've unfortunately come across a couple parents who don't want their children putting anything in their mouth. And up to a certain age, children should be able to explore with their mouth, be able to put things in and move it around with their tongue. It desensitizes their mouth. It also helps them learn the qualities of what's in their mouth, to understand what smooth and rough is and what hard and soft are. So it's really important for children to be able to explore with their mouth.
And doesn't it help with because I remember you telling me about the spoon. If you have if you give the baby the spoon, it helps kind of push back that gag reflex and gets them more comfortable.
Anything. Yeah. No, it's really important to introduce the spoon to the child even before they are self-feeding themselves with the spoon. You can also introduce things, any kind of chew toy that they can put into their mouth. Rather than just like a large thing that can only touch their lips and their teeth. If they have something long enough that they can put between their back gums, it strengthens the cheeks, it strengthens the jaw, it strengthens the tongue, the lips. And also desensitizes the mouth. It moves back the gag reflex a little bit. You don't want it completely gone. You obviously want the gag reflex, but it just basically helps bring the mouth, the oral motor skills in.
So why do you want the gag reflex?
You want the you want the gag reflex because that protects your life, so that if something does get stuck in the back of your throat, the gag reflex helps remove that, helps your body get rid of it, eliminate it.
And that's actually a lot of what I've seen and read, that when you're feeding your baby and you put the food back there, sometimes you put the food too far back, and that actually just ends up activating the gag reflex. So that's why it looks like my kid doesn't like this food, but I'm like, it's really where you're putting the food.
Yes, that's
into
a good
their
point.
mouth.
Yep.
Do you recommend where they should put the food in?
I actually prefer children to feed themselves, so that if they're not using a spoon, they use their hands.
So baby-led weaning, right? That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, and so introducing the spoon to the child, even if they don't have a whole lot on it, they can dip it in and try to put it into their mouth. But if you have to do it, if you have to spoon feed your child, I would just say at the front of the mouth. What you'd love to see is some lip closure over the spoon. Some people will put it into the sides a little bit so that the children can learn to move it around.
Yeah.
It depends, but definitely not far back.
Something I didn't realize I was doing, because I had twins and I always try to get it done as fast as I could, is I would scrape the top of their mouth. I did not know you shouldn't do that. I thought I was being really efficient. I'm like, so I was really quick. But they never got the chance to connect with the spoon, to do anything. I was doing everything for them.
Right.
So lesson learned.
Yep, and that brings me to another point. Dr. Toomey recommends not using the spoon to wipe the child's chin or the bottom lip, so that if you're feeding your baby and some of the food comes out, don't take the spoon and wipe it up.
Okay.
Because what happens is you're causing not a very pleasant experience having a spoon scrape across your child's chin.
Great, yeah. And I remember you even telling me let the baby be as messy as they can.
Yes.
Because they need to experience food with all their senses.
They do. And I have heard from parents who do keep their children clean all the time that their children do develop adverse reactions to being messy. So they don't want their hands messy. They don't want food on their face. And so that can have a bad effect if you keep your child completely clean all the time.
Yeah.
I did want to mention about you're talking about introducing flavors at a younger age.
Yes.
So there is research to show that a baby can sense different flavor within the amniotic fluid.
Yes, I have articles and videos about that.
And the breast milk, mom's breast milk. So that if mom eats a fairly bland diet, then the baby's milk will also be bland. So a mom who eats lots of herbs and spices, then that gets
Eat lots of garlic.
Yes. So that also gets transported through the mother's milk into the baby's mouth, and so the baby tastes it. So when you do start to introduce table foods, then the child is more accustomed to varying flavors.
So it's fascinating that they're starting to study this and starting to realize it. I will say that the caveat, if formula, it has one note, it always tastes the same. So, but when you're breastfeeding, whatever you're eating, it's going to change. Like when I nursed, my milk turned green when I ate a big salad.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so then they're eating arugula too.
That's awesome.
And because I did a lot of pumping, I got to actually see it a lot. And I'm like, oh, it's red today. Those beets worked.
Oh,
But I didn't know at
funny.
first. I'm like, what is going on? But the one thing is great that there's all these things out there that if you introduce solids, you must go through these 5 vegetables first, but don't give any fruits, and that's going to make an impact. I don't know. It sounds fishy, and I would say that eat a huge variety of foods while you're pregnant, huge variety of foods while you're nursing, and then just introduce a big variety of foods.
Right. There are babies though who do have a preference for either the vegetables or the fruits. So what I would recommend doing is perhaps taking a little bit, so let's say if the child or the baby wants to eat mostly pureed fruits and no vegetables, what I would recommend then is taking a little bit of vegetable and introducing it to the fruit puree, and so that the child gets a change in flavor. They still have the sweetness from the fruit, but there's a little bit of that savory vegetable mixed in. And so what you do is you gradually add more and more vegetable to the point where the child can handle or can tolerate all the vegetable.
So you're slowly conditioning them. One little trick, especially when they start to eat solids, is roasting vegetables. It takes the bitterness and makes them sweeter.
Yep.
So if you get peppers, just roast it and then peel the skin off. And give them to your kids, but they'll actually enjoy them more because it actually brings out more sweetness. Tammy, I'd like to really thank you for today. This was so informative. It was amazing.
You're welcome.
So
You're welcome.
We're very lucky to have her. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask the questions in the comments below. So we'll shoot them back to Tammy and see if she has any additional advice for you. She has amazing articles on feedingmykid.com, so make sure you check that out. We have tons of articles and ideas on Pinterest, and we share them on Twitter and Facebook, so be sure to follow all of that. And we look forward to our next series.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Have a good one. And if you're in the Orlando area and you need an occupational therapist, Tammy is your gal.
No, thank you. Thanks, Renee.
All right. Thanks, everyone.